Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Neville's Wish Fulfilled. This is episode 6, Action and an Action to Succeed. I'm of course here with my forever guest. You know him from True Neville Goddard, the main contributor. How are you doing?
Excellent. It's a good topic that we have today.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Last time we talked about what is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, today we're going to talk about action and inaction. I'm ready when you're ready. How do you feel?
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a few quotations from, of course, Neville.
Mm-hmm.
First one: the art of life is to sustain the feeling of the wish fulfilled and let things come to you, not to go after them or think they flee away. This is from Awakened Imagination in 1954. It's kind of like what we were talking about in the previous episode.
Yeah.
Second one is, God's action is your own wonderful imaginal act. That's God's action. Learn to say amen to your imaginal acts and then don't raise a finger to make it so. Let it be so. The Power of Faith, 1964. So both these things have to do with action, or the lack thereof, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people get confused on this topic.
Yeah.
So after hearing these two quotes, what did Neville advise with taking action, or did he advise not to? What do you think?
Right. The danger with these quotations and quotations in general is that they can be easily taken out of context.
Sure.
And they can be given, not that the author or the speaker did not mean what they said, but it makes it sound like it's very absolute, an absolute statement. It's not qualified, there are no nuances. And often the author says, well, in some situations, and then the quotation follows, right? But then if it's taken out of context, and with Neville, unfortunately, this happens very often. And Neville would say things like that when he was trying to make a point. So you have to pay attention to what he's saying. In these two specific statements that you quoted, he's talking about mental surrender rather than doing nothing physically. Mm-hmm. Because he talks about the law of assumption, and he says that that's how an assumption works. You assume it, you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then you allow things to take their course. That's why he says you shouldn't go after them or think they flee away. So you shouldn't be in a state of chasing. Now, if you're thinking they flee away, then you're definitely not living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Because if I saw the outcome and believe that the outcome has already happened, it's as good as done, then I cannot possibly think that it's running away from me.
Yeah.
So see, here he's talking about a mental state rather than saying you should assume and then just expect for it to drop in your lap. And in the second one is pretty much the same thing. It's an act of surrender. That's what he's talking about. He says in other lectures, I will completely yield to what I have seen in my imagination about myself or about others. I will trust it completely and implicitly, and then I will not do anything. And by that he means I'm not going to do anything mentally to try to, he talks about, I'm not going to check and see if it's growing. I planted the seed. I'm not going to pick it up and hold it in my hand and see what's going on with it. So I will drop it and let it, germinate, let the process take its course, and then I will see it materialize. Because unless you surrender, you're not going to go through what he calls the bridge of incidents. That's why I said you have to take things in context. Someone cannot say, well, Neville advised don't raise a finger, but at the same time he speaks about the bridge of incidents, where you're supposed to go through a series of events. Well, am I going through events or not, right? If it's dropping in my lap, then there's no event. So clearly there's a contradiction, and we shouldn't take these statements in absolute sense, but see them in a larger context of his teaching.
We shouldn't take them as literally either, because I know this says don't raise a finger.
Right, what does that mean? And then in another place it says you don't even raise a finger unless you have a desire to do so. He says, right? Everything is based on a desire to do something. He says, I won't even raise a finger unless I have a reason to do it or a desire to do it. So clearly he's not inviting us to become vegetables and then imagine on a couch and expect things to just knock on the door or come, this is just against common sense, really.
That kind of follows into the next thing I was going to say. Just whenever we read this subject online, people do just expect things to just kind of fall into your lap.
Yeah.
Does it ever really work that way?
Well, people take these statements out of context because they like the way it sounds. It sounds good, right? Isn't it nice? Wouldn't it be great if you could just assume these things and not have to do anything? It's a very seductive proposition, right? It's very appealing. Not that...
Yeah, I want a six-pack, but I want to stay in bed.
And eat ice cream, right,
Yeah.
if possible, So, I want to be a champion but not train for it, right? It doesn't work that way. And the examples we're just giving now, half jokingly, is really, they make sense. What if my desire is to be a chief surgeon, but I'm 17 years old? Can I become that by sitting in a chair, or do I have to go through school and do all these things? Doors will open for me, I'll meet the right people, I'll have, the right training, but you cannot tell me that I can get what I want by doing nothing. Can I build a business by doing nothing? I mean, look at anyone who's successful in the world of business. Are they passive? Are they lazy? I don't think so. So we need to keep it real in terms of what the facts are showing. The problem is, you mentioned, it's in the online space, in the online community, in the manifesting community, and there's going to be a lot of arguments from people who talk mere theory, right? They'll talk about anything is possible, but I bet they cannot even manifest little things, right? They have nothing to show for it, but they're making these huge claims, and they will argue with other people about it, from that standpoint. But it's only pure theory. Now, does it ever work that way? Can you get instant manifestations? Can you get stuff without taking action of any kind? You can. I mean, some manifestations can work that way. It always works in the fastest way possible. And other teachers make the same point. We mentioned Lester Levinson all the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, much to the surprise of his audience in the seminar, he said, well, if you're locked in a basement and you're imagining something happening, it's going to come to you if you're convinced, fully convinced, no doubt that thing will happen. It will happen no matter where you're locked and how your situation is. But you have to be in that state, We can say, well, how difficult can that be? Well, I bet most people cannot convince themselves of something easy. So can you get that level of conviction? Can you be like Jesus and say, Lazarus, come out, after you're told that he's 4 days dead? Can you have that conviction? You can play with the thought, but you don't have the conviction. So if you could generate the conviction, then yeah, can your mind get to that level? So you have to have a very deep realization. Some of the stuff we discussed last time, you have to be a very, very advanced spiritually to be in the position of don't lift a finger, and instant manifestation will happen. So it's not that I will say it's impossible. I will say that there are so many preconditions of a spiritual nature because convictions are not developed based on the reasoning mind, because the reasoning mind will say no to all of these things. Because don't lift a finger is at the opposite end of what's logical, of what makes sense. If I tell you that you can be a billionaire by sitting in a chair, then that's crazy. You're not even going to believe that you're going to have a business big enough for that, right? Even that's not believable. But to believe me when I say that you can be in a basement, and get billions brought to you, that sounds so insane that your mind cannot get to the level of certainty on that. Not on the level of the reasoning mind. So you need the realization of a different kind. This isn't even something that needs to be discussed if we can too deeply. We can do it just the way we do it now, but not take it too seriously because we're too far from these things. Most people are just too far from that ideal state, the top state, as Lester called it. So there will be some action, Neville's breach of incident. Now, Neville's success stories are often brought up by people who like to believe that they can get things the easy way and the lazy way, let's call it.
Yeah.
Because Neville would use these personal stories, and he would use them in order to inspire his audience, right? Not that those stories are the only ones that he has, but those are either the most spectacular or the most that are going to make the biggest emotional impact on his audience. So for example, he would talk about how he got out of the army, right, during World War.
Classic.
Yeah, during World War II. And it's interesting how he's in 1970 and he's still talking about these manifestations from the 40s, right? So clearly he thought they have an impact. So he talked about that one, where apparently he did nothing, and his commanding officer changed his mind from not allowing him to receive his honorable discharge to allowing it. But he did apply for it, right? He did his part. It's not like he did nothing. He applied. He filled out a form, right? He did something. But you see, the lack of action is inherent in the situation. What else could he do? This is the army. It's not like we can take action of any kind. That's the only action available to you. He took it.
Yeah.
It was denied. Then he imagined something else, and it was the commanding officer had a change of heart about it. Or he talks about his trips from Barbados back to New York and how there's no passage, and he imagined being on a ship, and lo and behold, he's put on the front of the list. Suddenly he gets a phone call, and people think, well, he's doing nothing. He's sitting in a chair imagining, and the phone rings. But the phone didn't ring out of nowhere. He put his name on the list to begin with, right? He was still on a list, on a waiting list. So there's action all the time. It's just that sometimes the action is not required. But other manifestations, another one that's pretty popular is when his brothers visited New York and they wanted to go to this opera, or this Broadway show, Aida, and it sold out. And Neville manifested a couple tickets for his brothers. And he talks how he waited in line, and he changed the line. And then there's this drama happening with these con men who are trying to get $20 from the teller to kind of deceive him, and Neville stepped in, and there's this whole production happening, and he's in the center of the whole action, Neville. So he's not only that there's a lot of action, but he's so central to the action in that one, and he gets the tickets for his brothers. So all the time action is needed, almost all the time, unless you're the spiritual master and things come to you while you're levitating in your basement. You will have to take action that makes sense in this world, because this is a world of movement, of time, linear, right? You have this time-space dimension, and you'll be required to do something, that towards the fulfillment of your desire.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a difference between like taking action that feels like it makes sense and action that feels like you got to do something like it's rash.
Right.
And I feel like there's a lot of people who feel like they should take like big, massive actions towards their goals.
Right.
Why do people feel compelled to take the actions themselves?
Well, it's, you have on the one side the group of people we just discussed who think that it should fall in your lap and don't raise a finger. And then there's the people who are the doers, right? They're action-oriented. Men in particular are like that. And they feel like they need to act. They don't have the patience to sit at home and wait for stuff to come to them. And that comes from a lack of belief in the law. Because the state of the wish fulfilled and living in the end is a mental state, right? You have to be in that mental state. It's like Neville would always use this metaphor of a pregnancy when he spoke about, or the seed, right? It's also a type of pregnancy, to describe the process. And he says, well, you have to wait for the duration. It has its appointed time, he says. Well, there are these people who want to rush things. They're anxious. They have anxiety, really, about it. And they start taking action before the pregnancy is over, the mental one. So they don't get themselves truly in the state of the wish fulfilled. They like to think they are in that state. They like to think that they believe because they're simply in a time crunch mentally. They're trying to fix a problem, some emotional disturbance, some need that is pressing. And they're telling themselves that, yeah, I believe, I'm living in the end, I'm in Sabbath, I'm in all these places, and I'm ready for action. But actually they're not taking inspired action that comes from the bridge of incidents, but they're taking, like you said, rash action that comes from lack, that comes from anxiety, and that's action that does not come from the identity of the wish fulfilled. It comes from the identity of the person who does not have what they want to have.
So even if you are in Sabbath, you still have to take action.
Sure, but the action that you take in that state, it's by compulsion, as Neville calls it. You're called to act. You're becoming an actor in your own play. But because you allowed, the thing to get charged properly, where the sequence starts. It's like a sequence. It's like, everybody's acting on autopilot almost in that stage. But you have to get in that stage first. Unless you energize your desire mentally to the point where you get into that state of the wish fulfilled, as Neville calls it, will not start, this autopilot thing. And you're gonna have this confused action that you're taking, desperate action almost, hoping for the best. It doesn't end well. Most of the time you're not getting what you want because you're just not ready for it mentally. You have not yet identified with the person who has what you want to have or who is what you want to be, and you're going to fail.
Well, do you think that free will has any effect on action and inaction? And what actions you take? Right.
No, that's a good question, and maybe we should have a separate episode on free will, because it's such a big topic and another one where people have such different opinions. Well, for Neville, there's no free will outside your freedom to select your assumptions. And he talks about it in The Power of Awareness. And he says that your only free will is to choose your assumptions. And that's another quotation or another of his statements that is not taken correctly by people who end up thinking that nobody has free will except them. And therefore everybody becomes their mental puppet, essentially. But Neville was clear that everyone has the ability to choose their assumptions, independent of anything. Now, whether that is true or not, maybe we'll talk in a different episode, but his idea of free will is that you choose your assumption, and then everything that happens, and I think that's at the beginning of one of his many chapters in that book. He has lots of short chapters, but he says that everything you do happens as a result of your assumption, is driven by that assumption, and you're compelled to do certain things, just like everybody else who aids in the fulfillment of your wish is compelled. You don't have to go out and find them. The law finds them for you, and they're enlisted, right, to help you. And they will, without knowing what they're doing or why they're doing it. They're not doing themselves a disservice. The law works perfectly, right, in the logic of everyone's life. But there's no free will, as far as Neville is concerned, in taking action. You're always taking action from an assumption that you have. And by that we mean the identity that you have. Because an assumption creates an identity or shifts your states, your shifting states, as Neville calls, which is really a shift in your identity. It may be a major shift or a minor shift, depending on what your desire is. If your desire is, to have an object, you don't have to change your identity for that. If you want to change a lot of stuff in your life, then you have to assume a different identity. Mm-hmm. If you're like lower class poor and you want to be rich and, CEO, executive, then you have to develop a new identity for that to happen. But the action itself is always aligned with your identity. And free will has nothing to do with it, basically. Because everything is kind of driven by this identity that you have. And whether you're going to fulfill your desire or not, and the action that you take, whether it's going to be successful or not, is based on how faithful you are to your assumption.
And if that's something that you're really supposed to have, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, if we discuss this in more detail,
Yeah, we'll have to.
we're gonna have to see to what extent things are predetermined, and to what extent this whole thing is a big play and nothing else. But we'll get to that maybe.
Okay. Well, do you think that there's any like big mistakes people make about action or inaction? Obviously, I feel like you kind of touched on this a little bit, but just to make it into one question.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, if we want to summarize what the big problems are, some people are too passive about it.
And some people are too compulsive.
That's right. Some people are too passive and they're too, I'm just going to sit here and imagine, and that's all I have to do. But you see, the problem is that when you take action, your mind feels like I'm working towards my goal. So
does that not help?
It does help, right? When you're doing something, even like it's small things or indirect things. If I just simply sit, my mind...
habits.
Yeah, exactly. My mind cannot easily accept that I can get what I want by doing nothing. If I'm doing something, it may not even be constructive, really, in hindsight, but in the moment, I feel that I'm working towards it. I'm making some kind of, directed effort towards what I want. But yeah, some people are too passive because they misunderstand what Neville said and how the law works. So that's one mistake. Another mistake that we sort of mentioned is when people tell themselves, I'm taking inspired action right now. Okay, well, lots of people, they have a breakup and they want to get back with someone and they wake up, so, I have inspired action to call that person. No, that's usually from anxiety, from a state of lack, from a state of missing a person or something, being in that mindset. Has nothing to do with anything inspired.
How do you know?
Well, how do you know when you're inspired or not?
Yeah.
That's is based very much on your mental state. If your mind is quiet, if you're relaxed, if you don't feel the attachment that we discussed last time, then you're most likely in a good mental state. If you're anxious, if you're afraid, if you're panicked, depressed, and any of these emotional states, there is a good chance, we're not going to make any absolute statements, because someone can always come up with some counterexample to anything almost. But most of the time, the action that you take is going to have a result that mirrors your mental condition at the time. So inspired action, what happens during the bridge of incidents, will only take place if you're in a confident state of surrender to the wish fulfilled. So that's another group, right? That is taking action, when they shouldn't. And finally, there are these people who either take action or they don't, but they are still impatient for some developments, a movement, as they call it. There's no movement, they say, right? Where is it? And they're looking for signs of all kinds. And they start telling themselves, I saw something. I saw angel numbers today, or I got some synchronicity that happened. And guess what? Exactly, my best friend was talking about exactly the same thing I was thinking. Is this a sign that I'm on the bridge of incidents? They obsess about where this is, where the manifestation is. Am I close? Am I far? But this also comes from doubt, right? It's the same state, basically, that is saying, is this coming at all? Is this happening at all? So you're not living in the state of the wish fulfilled when you're doing any of these things. So these are, I will say, the main mistakes that people make.
So what is inspired action? What is that's the perfect state that you need to be in as far as action and inaction?
Right, so inspired action is something that's purely intuitive, right? It's either intuitive or something that happens on the outside. Because when action happens towards the fulfillment of a goal, you may start it yourself, or someone else may start it. You get a phone call, you get a connection, something takes place. And it is very often that you will understand the connections only after the action, not during or when it happens. You're not even going to see it, how it's related. Neville often says that it will come suddenly and unexpectedly, he says. He said that in his first book, Your Faith is Your Fortune, his first full-length book, and he talks about it in his later lectures also. It will be unexpected and sudden when it happens. And I'm telling you from experience, and you know some of the stories that I'm looking at it and I don't realize that it's actually, you know, what I wanted. It has a sense of humor almost, God or the law, the way things happen. When they happen, usually you don't see it. If you're looking at it, it's probably not what it should be. You know, if you're paying attention, if you're like, it's something that you're making assumptions on or you're making predictions on. It's gonna sneak up on you like a thief in the night, as we read in the gospel. When the manifestation happens, it's quite often that it's that way. But always inspired action. And you know, people think that inspired action is only positive. Like if we take it literally, strictly to what it means, everything is inspired action. There's no such thing as action that is not inspired. But is it inspired by your feeling of the wish fulfilled, or is it inspired by anxiety?
Yeah.
Even when you make a phone call and you call your ex-girlfriend when you shouldn't, right, and it's premature, it's still inspired. But it's inspired by your anxiety, by your feeling of lack, of, you know, depression, heartbreak, whatever. But it's still inspired. Nothing that we do is outside action. People talk about external action. There's no such thing as external action. Because it's like saying that my mind is not involved in it. But your mind is always involved in the action you take. So in that strict sense, all action is inspired action. But we tend to restrict the definition to positive action that leads to this, you know, mythical bridge of incidents that takes you to the fulfillment of your desire. Now, in that more limited sense, that is not really a correct one, but to talk about it in that way, it is action taken from living in the end. That's inspired action. Once I have the state stable and I have identified with my goal, then things start happening. They just start happening. And usually when I think about something else, when you're not thinking about your wish fulfilled, the best ideas you don't get when you're thinking about it. You're asking a question and intuition comes when you're peeling potatoes or doing something else. Why? Because your reasoning mind is not involved in it. It allows for intuition to say something. If you're blocking it, if you're like, you know, making efforts from the conscious level, it's stopping the intuition from revealing, you know, some message or giving you some message or some direction. So inspired action, in conclusion, you get into the right state, you identify properly, and then action follows naturally.
What do you think is the ideal way of manifesting with this concept of action in mind?
Well, it's pretty much what Neville said. Really briefly, what that means is that you imagine what you want. You simply imagine it as being done. And once you saw it, and it feels real to you in the moment, it feels natural to you in the moment, you simply assume it is done. That's when you yield to the wish fulfilled. You just assume it is done. Completely surrender to this outcome as you saw it in your mind's eye. And then fully expect that you may be required to be involved in actions leading to the fulfillment of your wish. Now, again, people lie to themselves. They deceive themselves about all of these things, that they live in the end, that they have surrendered. But then you see that they're actually controlling, right? If you're reading from someone on Reddit and they're posting, they cannot possibly be in a state of surrender. They will not be asking questions. in a state of surrender? Do you ask questions? Do you post? If today is Wednesday, are you going to ask a question? Is tomorrow Thursday? Can someone tell me? You're not doing that. So if you're in a state of knowing, even if it's just mental, but if you're in a state of knowing, you're not going to have any questions. You're not going to look for signs. You're not going to try to predict. You're not going to try to see who can help you, mentally try to work it out. You're just going to let it be. You're just going to assume it is done and wait for things to happen. Mentally, we're not wait like sitting in a chair, but doing your work, doing other things, and then allow for this to unfold and take its course. As Neville said, everything has its appointed time. So imagine, assume it is done, surrender to what you saw, and be open to whatever action that might be required.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for all of this. And, I feel like there's a lot of... Every time we have one of these episodes, it opens up more ideas for
5 more episodes, absolutely, yes.
I know. So we'll definitely be talking about free will, because I think there's a lot of things that people have questions on, especially me.
Sure.
Personally. Yeah. So, okay. As always, you can find these topics on the sub. You touch on all of these things there. True Neville Goddard. Do you know any exact?
Yeah, we have a few posts about taking action or inaction, and inspired action. Some of these quotations maybe that you had or similar ones, definitely there's a lot of material on the sub that people can read.
And read these books, of course, if you haven't already.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go back to the source.
Mm-hmm. Next episode, I have a few in mind. I'm going to keep it vague right now, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. Same time, same place. And we hope you join us. Thanks for listening, guys.
See you soon.
Bye.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye.